Hey, Rob. Okay.
Hey, Stephen and Paul, are we good to go?
Not sure. Waiting on. Hold on one second. I'm trying to get in touch with Larry to see if he happens to know.
Okay.
If that was Sally who said hello to me, hi, Sally.
Hey, Rob. Yes, it is. I was waving to you, to your little square in the corner. Good to see you.
Yep, same here.
If we're alone, are you doing well?
Yeah, no, I think this is for everybody. So
Okay.
that's why,
Yeah. It's because of the way the Zoom is coming up. I use this a lot, but everybody else seems to be muted. I wasn't sure. Anyway,
Yeah,
we don't need to discuss our personal business on city planning time.
right.
So, Mr. Chair, we do have a quorum, it looks like.
Yes, but I think we're still kind of waiting for the system to load up. Is that right, Stephen?
Yeah, Bob. The issue is that Shantae's starting Granicus and it hasn't started all the way, so we just need to wait a few more minutes for that to be done.
Okay. So what you're saying is I should have read the email you just sent.
Well, you got the in-person, theatrical performance of the email.
For those who've joined late, we're probably about to start in 5 minutes. We're working out some technical difficulties right now. So we'll be getting started in probably 5 minutes. We're just waiting for the computer to upload. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, we are ready to go.
All right, thank you so much. I call the City Planning Commission meeting for September 22nd to order at 1:37. We'll start with a roll call of all commissioners that are present. Commissioner Brown,
Present.
Commissioner Flick,
Present.
Commissioner Lund, Commissioner Marshall,
Present.
Commissioner Mobley,
Present.
Commissioner Steeg,
Here.
Commissioner Stewart's present, Commissioner Weberg,
Present.
and Commissioner Witry.
Present.
All right, let the record reflect that all commissioners are present except for Commissioner Lund. At this time now, I accept the motion to approve the adoption of the minutes of the August 11th, 2020 meeting. Commissioner Witry, you're on mute.
Thank you. Commissioner Witry approves the August 11th, 2020 meeting minutes.
It's been moved by Commissioner Witry. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Seconds.
That motion was seconded by Commissioner Flick.
Commissioner Mobley seconds.
So Commissioner Mobley, I recognize Commissioner Flick. You guys spoke at the same time. So I have Commissioner Flick with the second. Is there any further discussion on that motion? If not, I'll call the question. Commissioner Brown,
Yes.
Commissioner Flick,
Yes.
Commissioner Marshall,
Yes.
Commissioner Mobley,
Yes.
Commissioner Steeg,
Yes.
Commissioner Stewart votes yes, Commissioner Weberg,
Yes.
Commissioner Witry.
Yes.
At this time now, I'll read the special public hearing rules for the CPC hearing via conference today. Order of business. The order of business at the hearing should be as follows. Call to order and roll call with recording of members present, approval of the minutes, reading of the hearing rules, presentation of docket, staff presentation, applicant presentation, questions from members, recess for 30 minutes, consideration of docket, public comment, rebuttal by applicant, questions from members, voting, and then adjournment. Presentation of dockets. The order of business for each docket shall be as follows. Presentation by the City Planning Commission staff or the Department of Safety and Permit staff. Presentation by the applicant or the representatives, the appellate, or the applicant may appear on the behalf of or be represented by a duly authorized agent. Only one representative may speak on behalf of the request and must pre-register with staff, the City Planning Commission. Other representatives or speakers may sign up to provide comments during the public comment portion of the meeting. The applicant shall be allowed a maximum of 3 minutes. Question from members. The members have an opportunity to ask questions of the staff or applicant. Recess. The commission board shall take a 30-minute recess to allow members of the public to comment. Public comment. Rules. Only written public comment will be allowed. Live public comment will not be allowed. No member of the public may submit more than one written comment per agenda item. Time allowed for the public comment. The public comment form will be made available at the start of the meeting and will close at the end of the 30-minute recess. Public comment must be submitted electronically on the form provided by the City Planning Commission. Any comment missing this information will not be read aloud. Each submission must contain the commenter's first and last name, commenter's address, and whether the commenter is being paid in connection with his or her comments, and also the agenda item. A moderator will read into record all comments pertaining to that item that has been submitted in accordance with these rules. Comments will be read aloud in normal speaking voice. The moderator will discontinue reading a comment once it exceeds 2 minutes. Rebuttal by applicant. Following the public comment period, if there's any opposition, the authorized representative of the application is allowed a rebuttal not to exceed 3 minutes. Question from members. Following the public comment and rebuttal, the members have an opportunity to ask questions of the staff or applicant. Voting. The member making a motion shall clearly state their name when making a motion. For example, I, Jonathan Stewart, move to approve, deny the request. Seconding the motion. The member seconding the motion shall clearly state their name when seconding the motion. For example, I, Jonathan Stewart, second the motion made by Commissioner Mobley. Statement by the chair. The chair will restate the motion and confirm who made and seconded the motion. Voting. The chair will request a verbal vote for each member by roll call. Each member will indicate yay to vote in support of the motion or nay to vote in opposition. At this time now, we hear our second agenda item, subdivision docket 07920.
Subdivision docket 07920 is a request by the Housing Authority of New Orleans to re-subdivide lots 1, 2, and 3 into lots 1A, 1B, 1C, and 1D. The municipal addresses are 1018 Melpomene Street and 1347 through 1355 Constance Street. The proposed re-subdivision would create 4 lots. 1 corner lot and 3 interior lots from the 3 existing lots, which is 1 corner lot, the interior lot that it abuts, and a second interior lot that abuts the first. The fronts of all 3 existing lots face Constance Street, with the corner lot also having frontage along Melpomene Street. One of the proposed lots will be created from the combined rear portions of the 3 existing lots, and as such, its front will face Melpomene Street, which technically constitutes a reversal of the 3 original lots' Constance Street frontage, and will also result in a required rear yard abutting a required side yard. For that reason, this request requires review by the City Planning Commission in accordance with Article 5, Section 518, which has to do with the reversal of lot frontage. Section 518 states that the City Planning Commission will look with disfavor on proposals reversal of lot frontage if they will result in a side yard abutting a required rear yard. However, Section 518 also contains an exception to this general policy of disfavor. Reversals of lot frontage are acceptable when the existing lot pattern within 500 feet on both sides of the proposed re-subdivision on each affected street contains development on which 50% or more lots have similar frontage. The requested hand meets the criteria for that exception and thus is approvable. Accordingly, the staff recommends tentative approval subject to 3 provisos.
Thank you. Do we have a representative for Hano or a authorized representative from Hano to speak on this docket?
Applicant is present. I don't think we have additional comments for that.
Okay, thank you so much.
Commissioner Stewart, this is Commissioner Stee. Can the Hano let us know who the developer is?
Yes, I'm an architect representing developer. So this is a public-private partnership between Hano and Iris River Bend.
I'm glad to know that. So I need to recuse myself on this matter, Mr. Chair. So can you reflect me as being recused?
Yes, Commissioner Stee. Are there any other questions for the applicant representative for this subdivision docket? If not, we'll move on to subdivision docket 8220.
All right, subdivision docket 082-20 is a request to re-subdivide Lot E and part of ARPIT 93 into 2 lots of record, Lot X and Lot Y. Existing Lot E is located in the SRS district, while part of ARPIT 93 is located in the SB2 district. Lot E is currently developed with a single-family residence. There is a 100-foot shed located on the Springwood Street side of ARPIT 93. The lot is otherwise vacant and undeveloped. The effect of the subdivision would dramatically increase the size of the lot on Reed Boulevard. The other lot, which runs on Chef-Mentor Highway, is intended to eventually be developed for commercial use. The subdivision requires review by the City Planning Commission, both because it would create an irregular L-shaped lot and because the L shape would be split zoned. In most cases, subdivisions that create a minor L shape, that is where the dogleg of the L shape of the lot is 15% of the remainder of the lot, this will be acceptable to staff. In this proposal, the new L shape of proposed Lot X has a dogleg that is approximately 61% of the remaining lot, which exceeds the 15% threshold. Further, the subdivision would remove an existing rear lot line that coincides with a zoning line, which would result in the proposed Lot X being a split zone lot. The staff does not support the creation of a split zone lot because it creates difficulty in applying zoning regulations, as a part of the property is subject to one set of regulations and the remainder is subject to a different set of regulations. The appropriate way to ensure that the lot is developed in accordance with the city zoning ordinance is for one site to be under one zoning classification. In this case, that must be achieved by leaving the lot lines as they are. The alternative way of creating a uniform zoning for Lot X would be a zoning change so that the entire lot would be zoned SRS residential district. The consistency table in Appendix A of the Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance does not include the SRS district as a zoning district that is consistent with the neighborhood commercial future land use designation, and thus this zoning change would not be allowable under the master plan. This being the case, the zoning lines could not be moved to coincide with the new lot lines created as a result of the subdivision. Since the current lot lines coincide with the zoning lines, they should be retained in their current locations, and the subdivision proposal should be denied.
Thank you so much. We have the applicant for subdivision docket 08220 present. Our representative to speak on the applicant's behalf.
Amy should be on the call.
Amy, are you with us?
Okay. I guess, can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. Okay. So first of all, yes, we don't have a problem with changing the zoning of lot X that we want to create to single family residential. I know my lot, the part of ARPA 93 is zone commercial, but we're going to leave the front half that fronts on Chef commercial. And then the part that is going to go with the residential portion, we want that changed to residential. We're not asking for a split zone. And as far as, the deviation from the norm because it's oversized, well, I mean, there's all kinds of weird lots in New Orleans, and this will just become another one of them, I don't think that should be a reason to deny the Dorseys, that's who lives at the house at 4533 Reed, the property that I'm actually giving them this property. They're not buying it from me. I'm not making any money off this. I'm 100% donating that strip to the Dorsey family that lives in that house on Reed. And I was asked to do that by the church. The church, I bought the whole property on the corner, and they had helped the church. They've cared for the property. They've run off tire dumpers and debris dumpers. So when I bought the property, the church asked me if I would mind donating that to that family, and I didn't have a problem doing that. So that's why I'm doing that today, so that I can donate that, to them, so that will become part of their lot. Other than that, that's really all I got to say about it. Yeah, the church didn't rebuild after the tornado. They did. And that's why the lot's been empty since the tornado. And like I said, I now own it and am now donating that back piece to the lot E to create lot X.
I'm sorry, I was actually on mute. So commissioners, do you have any questions for the applicant or staff at this time?
Sorry, I was on mute. I do have a question for staff. I'm having trouble, I'm looking at it and I'm having trouble understanding, is this going to front on two streets? Can you walk me through how this the requested layout? Does this now front? I'm looking at the property viewer and the actual survey documents, and I'm having trouble reconciling the two. About, is it become a 3-street or is it a 2-street facing? Staff.
So it will front on the lot E, the existing lot E fronts on Reed Street. So proposed lot X would front on Reed Street, and then it would be an L shape that would go up to the Springwood street side, but it won't front on a street on that side. And then the lot Y, the proposed lot Y, would front on Chev.
So it is taking that strip that I'm looking at on the property viewer, and it is making 2 lots out of that long strip. The X lot fronts on Reed, and it is, for lack of a better term, a key lot that doesn't go all the way to Springwood. It abuts another property. It abuts a
Exactly.
lot of properties. So as it runs up towards Springwood Street, it runs behind all of those parallel properties on Reed. But then there
On
is
Reed, yes. Mhm.
okay, and then there is a second lot that's just a good old long lot that would front on Chef.
Correct.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions for staff or the applicant at this time? Okay, I have one question for the applicant. So since you're making a donation for the existing lot of E, is your intention to actually give in that same donation the L shape as well with the new lot that's going to be formed? Amy?
Well, the family, they live in that house that's lot E, that's 4533 Reed. What I am donating to them is that that would become a part of their lot, that entire strip. I can tell you the plan down the road that the Dorsey family wants to do is at some point be able to donate a piece to each of the neighbors that actually live along Reed. Now that's something that's going to happen further. That's going to happen down the road at some point. But as of right now, the goal is just to donate that piece, that strip, to the Dorsey family, and then that's why we're doing the re-subdivision so that it all would now become part of his property.
Okay. Are there any other questions for the applicant and staff? If not, thank you, Amy, and we'll move on to subdivision docket 08620.
Good afternoon. The next docket is subdivision 8620, which is a request to subdivide lots 1, 2A, one designated portions, and a 4-foot common alley into lots 1A, 1B, and 1C located in an HUB1A historic urban neighborhood business district and an HURD2 historic urban two-family residential district. The applicant has stated the proposed lots are intended to conform the lot lines to the existing structures and encroachments. If the subdivision is ultimately approved, the applicant will need to seek waivers from the Board of Zoning Adjustments for the deficiencies as listed in the staff report. In addition, the subdivision is subject to a conditional use ordinance from zoning docket 6917 and will remain subject to that ordinance even after the subdivision. It has been reviewed by Policy B in accordance with Article 3. Section point 3.2.2 of the subdivision regulations. The proposal meets criteria A, B, and C. The proposed subdivision meets the aforementioned criteria of Policy B in that the proposed subdivision will create more compliant conditions that do not currently exist and be considered a general improvement to the current conditions by increasing the respective lots areas and not reducing them when conforming lot lines to the existing structures, as well as having improvements antedating 1950. The subdivision would additionally facilitate the continued operation of the site in a manner consistent with the residential low-density pre-war future land use designation of the master plan. Staff recommends tentative approval of subdivision 8620, with final approval subject to 5 provisos.
Thank you. At this time, do we have a representative for this document matter, applicant or an authorized representative to speak on behalf of the applicant?
Yes, I'm here, Cornelius Payne.
All right, Mr. Payne, please state your name and address for the record.
Sure. Cornelius Payne, 833 Jackson Avenue, New Orleans, Louisiana. I'm sorry.
Information at this time.
Okay. So this site is a compound of properties that used to be 2 lots, and it used to be a federal home business back in the 1860s. So this property, excuse me, had encroachments, and they were going over the property line. And as as staff has recommended, this is a general improvement to break the properties into 3 lots and 3 lots of records. And also it just makes the titles more merchantable from a financing standpoint to have each building on its own lot of record.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from any commissioners for staff or the applicant? Any questions for staff or the applicant? If not, thank you, Mr. Payne, and we'll move on to subdivision docket 09020.
Good afternoon. Subdivision docket 9020 is a request to re-subdivide lot M into lots M1 and M2 in an HUMU historic urban neighborhood mixed-use district. Existing lot M is a corner lot containing 4,400 square feet, an area with 40 feet of primary frontage along Chapatula Street. The proposed re-subdivision will result in the creation of 2 lots, one with frontage on Chapatula Street and the other with frontage along Upper Line Street. Proposed lot M1 is currently developed with a 2-family residence, and the applicant intends to develop a single-family residence on proposed lot M2. The proposal would result in the changing of lot frontage of the existing lot by reorienting a portion of a lot, proposed lot M2, from Chapatula Street to Upper Line Street. This reversal of lot frontage requires review by the City Planning Commission in accordance with Article 518, reversal of lot frontage of the subdivision regulations. In general, the City Planning Commission would look with favor upon proposals that result in the placing of lot frontages along major streets, given that they would not result in lot orientations contrasting with the surrounding lot pattern. After review, the staff has found that the request meets the approval criteria of Section 518, reversal of lot frontage, since the proposed lot configuration would be generally consistent with the surrounding patterns. The staff recommends approval of subdivision docket 9020, subject to 3 provisos.
Thank you. Do we have the applicant present?
Yes, Sally Fleming. I'm the representative and owner of 490103 Chapatula Street, LLC. And I really have nothing to add to the staff report. I thought it was extremely well prepared and thorough. I also have spoken with my lender to make sure that if you all do the re-subdivision, that I'm not going to have any issue with them about, assisting me with the development of the second lot.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Commissioner,
you.
do you have any questions for staff or for the applicant at this time? If not, we'll move on to property disposition 00220.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Property disposition 0220 is a request initiated by the City of New Orleans for the disposition of public land that is a 2-block long, unconstructed Leek Avenue right-of-way between Henry Clay Avenue and Audubon Park and the Audubon Zoo. The land has been leased to Children's Hospital for 20 years, and this lease extends decades into the future. A portion of the land directly behind the hospital is zoned MC Medical Campus, and another portion adjacent to Venger Field is zoned OSR Open Space Regional Park. Over time, the hospital has used the land for parking, but more recently has built a small structural encroachment and installed some above ground storage tanks in the land for backup generators, which are pictured in your staff report. The purpose of the City Planning Commission's consideration is whether the land is needed for public purposes. The Department of Public Works has no objection to the sale of the land, which dead ends at Audubon Park. There is no need to extend Leek Avenue across Audubon Park to connect with the short portion of unconstructed right-of-way on the downriver side of the park, most of which is used for parking. It is not advisable to extend a major new road across one of New Orleans' major parks and the zoo habitat. All city agencies on the Planning Advisory Committee have stated no objection and no need for the land. Entergy and the Sewage and Water Board require servitudes to access their facilities, and therefore the staff recommends an up-to-date utilities survey as described in the provisos and servitudes established and approved by those agencies. The staff recommends approval of the property disposition subject to 2 provisos, and we also request to make a technical correction on the numbering of the 2 provisos. But we've also just recently, just within the past few minutes, received a request from the Department of Property Management requesting a deferral of the property disposition to review some recently received materials. And the Department of Property Management is essentially the applicant of this property disposition request. Thank you.
And thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions for staff as it relates to this docket?
I do have one question. I'm sorry, I had trouble. And do we have any idea what the materials are? Are they related to the dimensions or anything of the property, or is it something that would alter the application?
How big is the property?
No, it's just the request for deferral. I'm just curious.
What is that related to?
Mm-hmm.
There's been a lot of comments coming in, so they weren't specific about which material they wanted to review.
And that's from the applicant?
Yes, essentially the Department of Property Management of the city acts as the applicant in property disposition cases.
Right, okay. Not the person who's interested in purchasing if this goes forward?
No.
Okay.
From the city.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for this docket matter?
Paul, just for clarity, the comments that were coming in are from the city and not from the public?
We're getting some from the public, from neighborhood residents, some from attorneys representing various parties, as well as some city agencies.
So now they're requesting a deferral?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Is there a timeline for the deferral?
You can defer for up to 45 days. So probably recommend a 2-meeting deferral.
Is that enough? Do you know the nature of what they're needing to, I mean, we could do, well, I guess 2 does that. Never mind.
Well, and also it would be on a once you make this.
That was my question.
We have 45
my
days.
question.
Pretty good.
Are there any other questions in regards to this docket matter?
Sorry, I interrupted. Council, what is the deadline on this one? Or Paul, what is the deadline on this one?
It would be, it's 45 days from now. So if you do the 2nd October meeting, that would be well within the deadline.
Thank you.
I have one more question relating to the procedure, which is, what do we do with all the comments? Are we still going to hear them before we vote on a request for deferral?
Yes, because you're actually taking
Right.
an action, you will still hear public comment.
Good.
Are there any more questions in regards to this docket matter? If not, we'll move on in the agenda to the 2021-2025 Capital Improvement Plan.
Yeah, staff is requesting a 3-week deferral of the capital improvement plan to the October 13th public hearing to allow for more time to address specific proposals within the plan.
And I believe the committee will meet hopefully before that.
Yeah,
Yes, I will. I spoke with Commissioner Brown. We do plan on having scheduling a meeting of the planning and special projects, land use planning and special projects committee. We are Kelly and I had talked about the end of this week, but it probably makes more sense to do it sometime towards the middle or the end of next week. We have been working with the administration on kind of finalizing a couple of the proposals that are going to be in the plan, and so we still have some work to do with the administration, just getting all that straight before we bring it to you all. So I will send out an email shortly to see what dates are available for the committee members.
All right. Thank you. Are there any more
Thank you.
comments or questions for about the capital improvement plan? If not, the chair will entertain a motion for a 30-minute recess to take public comment on what document matters we've heard today. And then at that time, we'll come back and take action.
So I move we
Motion.
recess. Oh, go ahead.
For recess, resuming at 2:40 PM.
It's been moved by Commissioner Flick for a recess of a 30-minute recess, returning back at 2:40. Is there a second to that motion?
Yeah, I second. Commissioner Steig seconds.
Commissioner Steig has seconded that motion. Any further discussion or comments? And then I'll call for question. Commissioner Brown,
Yes.
Commissioner Flick,
Yes.
Commissioner Marshall,
Yes.
Commissioner Mobley,
Yes.
Commissioner Steig,
Yes.
Commissioner Stewart votes yes in support. Commissioner Weberg. Commissioner Weberg is on mute, but
Yes.
he's the affirmative. And Commissioner Witry.
Yes.
All right, we'll take a 30-minute recess and we'll return back at 2:40. Commissioners, as you return, please turn your cameras back on so that we know if you're present, so that we can go ahead and get started. Time now is 2:41. I'll take roll call to see if we have a quorum so that we can come out of recess. Commissioner Brown,
Here.
Commissioner Flick,
Present.
Commissioner Marshall, Commissioner Mobley,
Here.
Commissioner Mobley, are you here?
Here.
Okay. Commissioner Steeg,
Here.
Commissioner Stewart is present, Commissioner Weberg,
Present.
and Commissioner Witry.
Present.
Thank you. All right. We'll move to subdivision dockets 07920 to review public comment. Let the record show that Commissioner Steeg will be recusing himself on this subdivision docket.
Thank you.
Chair, you ready for the public comment?
Yes.
There are no comments in support, but there is one item, one comment in opposition. Justin Schmidt, paid representative of Julie Simpson. Mr. Schmidt's address is 909 Poydras Street, Suite 1500, New Orleans. As counsel for the owners of 1365 Constant Street, I write to object to subdivision docket 7920. The principal objection to this application is the fact that, as reflected on the proposed re-subdivision plat, my clients enjoy a predial servitude over current lots 1, 2, and 3, proposed lot 1D, from their property to Melpomene Street. The survival and existence of this servitude was last addressed in 2016 when my clients confirmed this servitude with the owner of 1357-59 Constant Street, which is recorded at conveyance instrument 602217. As Commissioner Steeg can explain, a predial servitude is a real right and incorporeal, immovable, derived by written contract in immovable property that it burdens, in this case, proposed lot 1D. As such, with respect to the re-subdivision process, it is similar to a mortgage in that it is a change against the property being subdivided. Just as the CZO and subdivision regulations require all owners and mortgage holders to consent to the subdivision, so must the dominant estate owner, my clients. Without their consent, this application cannot legally be considered, as the City Planning Commission, in approving it without their consent, would be seen as intentional interference of contract. Additionally, while the staff believes that the proposed re-subdivision can be approved under the exception in section 5.1.8 of the subdivision regulations by reducing the 3 lots fronting on Constant Street by 30 feet, said reconfiguration contradicts the predominant pattern of this and adjacent squares with 30 by 120 foot lots fronting on Constance and Magazine, with 2 key lots measuring approximately 30 by 160 each on Melpomene and Terpsichore streets. While there are some deviations, there are few, and this reconfiguration only benefits the finances of the developer while limiting the size of homes that can be constructed on the remaining 72-foot deep buildable area, creating inconsistency in the homes in this neighborhood. That is the extent of the opposition.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions for staff or a motion for this subdivision docket?
Can we get a comment from staff on the servitude issue and whether that is something that might have been, I'm trying to read these comments and match them up with what they're describing, and I think it might be better if the staff explains it to us all.
Yeah, this is Stephen. I'll briefly make the comment that the servitude is an arrangement between the property owners. It's not something that the city's party to, and the subdivision wouldn't eliminate the servitude. So certainly there's nothing in the subdivision regulations that creates that as a grounds to deny it. Missy may need to opine sort of on the legal content of the question, but from the perspective of the staff, it is the servitude is there today. It will remain there today, and it'll just go across the rears of 3 lots as opposed to the side of 1 lot.
Okay, so Missy, I don't know, is that previous servitude, that is what he's referring to in the comment, that it follows title as like a covenant would, is that correct, or?
I would have to see the document to see what's in the contents of the document, but as Stephen said, it's not, the subdivision is not affecting the servitude, it's still going to be there, so that's why the staff felt that they could take up this application.
Okay.
But I can't comment on the details of it because I've never seen this document.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Stephen, for this subdivision docket, at any time did the any other parties reach out to address that certitude or try to submit any documentation showing the covenants with the mortgage or any type of documentation?
So I personally haven't received anything. Robin is the planner handling this. Okay.
I have not either.
Okay. All right. Are there any more questions for staff for subdivision docket 07920 or a motion?
Just to be clear, we don't have the copy of the servitude that they're saying is recorded. Is that correct?
Correct.
That is correct.
They did not submit that with their comments. So I guess you can't upload any documents, correct? They're
Right.
just
So
public comments.
the survey shows the location of the servitude, but doesn't show the content of the agreement. And that wasn't submitted with the public comment, so it's not something that can be accepted at this time because the window for public comment has closed.
And also, I would pull it up on the land records if I could, but I don't have a password currently to that.
Are we able to pull up the survey?
Yeah, Larry, I don't, the survey should show up on the PowerPoint image if you're able to put that on the screen.
Thank you.
So it's sort of hard to see, but you'll see there's a common alley on the right side of lot 1D, and the servitude is 5-foot servitude of passage that's in dotted lines on the rightmost part of proposed lot 1D, and it immediately adjoins that common alley. So the servitude is shown on blue here, and it's right next to the common alley that's shown in white.
If you look at the staff report, there's a bigger shot of it on page 5.
So are the owners concerned that, I mean, the common alley would still remain in effect and the re-subdivision would not affect access to that common alley?
That's correct. So I think the context of this is that Hannah owns these 3 lots that would become 4 lots on Melvin and Constance. Hannah also owns additional property to the right side of the common alley that's not shown here. And Hannah intends to develop lots A1, B, and C. So the 3 facing Constance with singles. 1D facing Malcolm would be developed with a double, and then I believe the 2 lots on the opposite side of the common alley would be developed with a double. So, you know, I don't want to put myself in the shoes of the person submitting public comment, but it sounds like the concern is that the access to, to the rear, the building to the rear of the site that's kind of just off of what's shown on the survey would be impaired. The development plan that the applicant has submitted, shows that access way still being there, and it would simply go along the edge of lot 1D. So, certainly the approval is for the subdivision. It's not for any specific development that ultimately happens with the lot, but what has been presented to CPC staff by the applicant indicates that the access would still be there.
So Stephen, you're saying that, I know you didn't want to necessarily assume that the comment was about that specific property, but you're talking about the one next to lot, immediately next to 1A, is that correct?
Yes, there's a
Okay.
lot that's immediately behind 1A and 1D,
Okay.
which is where the servitude leads. And
Right.
I believe the comment is on behalf of the owner of that property, concerned about access to that property.
Right. But the subdivision, as I see it, doesn't inhibit that alley. It just is, it's going to remain there. It looks.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. It will remain there. And of course, Hannah will have the obligation of developing lot 1D in a way that doesn't build over the servitude. So,
Okay.
I think it's certainly something Hannah and that property owner need to be communicating with each other about, but the subdivision by itself, in my view, doesn't create a problem as it relates to the servitude.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Stephen. At this time, is there a motion or any more comments or questions for staff?
This is Commissioner Mobley. Motion to approve the subdivision 7920 with 3 provisos according to staff recommendation.
I did just receive a copy of the servitude from Justin Schmidt, just as an FYI.
Okay. Well, we have a motion on the floor, so I'll let.
All right. So at this time, it's been moved by Commissioner Mobley for approval with the provisos. Is there a second to that motion?
If we are moved to look at that before, or will we need unanimous, or is this, are we closed to that part of the proceedings here?
You would need to.
Yeah, I think at this time, Commissioner Mobley has not received a second to her motion, and we would have to suspend the rules to accept that survey. Missy, is that correct? For the suspend our rules to accept that, and then
you can either suspend the rules to accept it right now and review it really quick, or you can defer this. And is there time to defer this? Is on?
So it's on deadline. The applicant could consent to a deferral, and it could be deferred with the applicant's consent.
I don't know if the applicant is still on the line, but I don't know. I don't know how fast you're going to be able to review this. I certainly don't feel comfortable reviewing it in 2 seconds. So that's.
So the applicant's representative, Milwaukee, is on
Yeah,
the line.
I'm here.
So.
I'm still here. I mean, our preference is project has a deadline, so that it's gonna be great to get the result right now. But so the argument of servitude will remain as it is. Will make you decision of approval. I just like to emphasize that the servitude stay as it is.
Okay. So at this time, Commissioner Mobley still has her motion on the floor. If we don't receive a second, it's going to die for lack of a second.
I'll give the second, and then I would like to ask a question of the applicant.
All right. So we have a motion that's been moved by Commissioner Mobley for approval with the proviso, seconded by Commissioner Weberg. Commissioner Weberg, at this time, I go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, so the representation of the developer is that the servitude remains in place.
Right.
Thank you.
All right. Are there any other questions or comments, concerns to the motion by any other commissioner? But now I'll call the question. Commissioner Brown,
Yes.
Commissioner Flip,
Yes.
Commissioner Marshall,
Yes.
Commissioner Mobley.
Yes.
Commissioner Stieg has recused himself from this docket. Commissioner Stewart votes yes in support. Commissioner Weberg,
Yes.
Commissioner Witry.
Yes.
The motion is carried. The next subdivision docket is 08220. And I believe we did not receive any public comments for this subdivision docket. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So at this time, are there any questions from any commissioners or a motion?
This is Stephen again, just as a refresher, the staff is recommending denial based on the proposed split zone condition and to a lesser extent, the L-shaped lot.
So this is Commissioner Stieg. I'll make a motion to accept staff recommendation.
It's been moved by Commissioner Stieg to accept staff's recommendation for denial. Is there a second to that motion?
Witry will second the motion.
Has second the motion for denial. Is there any discussion from any commissioners or questions in regards to the motion?
Commissioner Mobley, I have a question of staff. Since the applicant doesn't care about the split zoning, is there any way to reconcile that status and take that issue off the table?
So the one way of dealing with it would be for the zoning line to be moved to coincide with the new rear lot line of that residential property. The problem with that, and the reason we didn't recommend it in the staff report, is that what you're essentially doing is expanding the residential district to an area that is designated by the master plan as neighborhood commercial, and which doesn't allow for that residential zoning. So it's something that could be requested of the council. It's something that council conceivably could approve, but the staff would likely not support it because we would view it as not being allowable under the master plan. So I guess what I'm saying is, if you sort of want to punt on the merits of the zoning change and look at the subdivision with that to the side, you could approve this with the proviso that it have no effect unless and until a zoning change is approved by the council. Just at staff level, we're reluctant to suggest that because we don't want to recommend that the applicant pursue a zoning change that we at staff level would not be able to support.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for staff? Or comments about the motion? If not, I'll call the question. Commissioner Brown,
Yes.
Commissioner Flick,
Yes.
Commissioner Marshall,
Yes.
Commissioner Mobley,
Yes.
Commissioner Stieg,
Yes.
Commissioner Stewart votes yes in affirmative for denial. Commissioner Weberg,
Yes.
Commissioner Witry.
Yes.
All right. Motion is carried for denial for subdivision docket 0820, subdivision docket 08620.
There are no public comments on this docket.
There's no public comment. We received staff's recommendation for tentative approval with 5 provisos. Are there any comments or a motion from a commissioner?
Commissioner Flick will make a motion to approve docket 8620 with tentative approval and 5 provisos.
Commissioner Flick has moved for approval of subdivision docket 08620 with tentative approval with 5 provisos. It's been seconded by Commissioner Brown. Is there any further discussion or comments for staff on this docket matter? Any comments, questions for staff? If not, I'll call the question. Commissioner Brown,
Yes.
Commissioner Flick,
Yes.
Commissioner Marshall,
Yes.
Commissioner Mobley,
Yes.
Commissioner Steve,
Yes.
Commissioner Stewart, yes. Commissioner Weberg,
Yes.
Commissioner Witry.
Yes.
Division docket 08620 has been approved. We'll move on to our next subdivision docket, which is 09020.
There are no public comments on this docket.
We received a staff recommendation for approval with provisos for subdivision docket 9020. Are there any comments or questions for staff or a motion for the subdivision docket?
I'm sorry, I'm the applicant, but what I see online is you still have the 8620 up. I'm only pointing that out because I'm sure other people may be trying to follow this.
There it is. All right. So for subdivision docket 09020, is there any questions for staff or a motion?
This is Commissioner Stieg, I move approval in accordance with staff recommendation.
It's been moved by Commissioner Stieg for approval with staff recommendations. Is there a second to that motion?
Commissioner Flick will second.
It's been seconded by Commissioner Mobley. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Any further discussion on the motion? If not, I'll call the question. Commissioner Brown,
Yes.
Commissioner Flick,
Yes.
Commissioner Marshall,
Yes.
Commissioner Mobley,
Yes.
Commissioner Steve,
Yes.
Commissioner Stewart votes yes. Commissioner Weberg,
Yes.
Commissioner Witry.
Yes.
Subdivision docket 09020 has been approved. Now we'll move on to our next docket matter, which is property disposition 00220. And we received numerous public comments. So at this time, you can start reading the public comment. I want to make sure that everyone is aware who's watching that public comment is limited to 2 minutes. At that time, any public comment that exceeds the 2 minute will be cut off, and we will continue reading the public comments received.
Chairman, I also just want to remind and confirm, this was the item that was requested by the applicant for deferral, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you,
But
Mr. Chair. Some of these comments will likely go over 2 minutes, so if someone could let me know, that'd be great.
Absolutely. I'll let you know, Paul.
First comment is Rhonda Williams, paid representative of Children's Hospital, 201 St. Charles Avenue. First, a point of clarification. There have been comments and attempts to insert issues into this proceeding that are not before the commission. The issue before the commission is not noise or the location of the Children's Hospital helistop, as some are attempting to suggest. That issue is the subject of an appeal pending before the Board of Zoning Adjustments. The sole issue before the commission is the disposition of Leak Avenue, and the staff's report has correctly determined that there is no impediment to the disposition of Leak Avenue. Based on the 10 criteria for evaluation set forth in the commission's rules, the proposed property disposition should be approved. Children's Hospital has leased Leak Avenue for over 30 years for various uses, including expansion of a building to provide much needed surgical services to sick children, as well as providing necessary ancillary services for hospital operations, such as storage of medical waste and parking. Children's Hospital seeks to continue its use of Leak Avenue so that it can install diesel fuel tanks, which are needed to fuel generators that are necessary for providing power and continued services to patients during emergency situations, which is critically important to our city during times such as hurricane season. The disposition of Leak Avenue for this purpose is consistent with the master plan and current zoning. Without question, use of Leak Avenue by Children's Hospital has served as a public purpose for years and will continue to do so. There is no impact on transportation as this street has been in use by Children's Hospital for decades. The Planning Advisory Committee also recommended approval of the disposition. Children's Hospital fully agrees with the staff report and the recommendation of the Planning Advisory Committee. Children's Hospital further understands the provisos related to utility servitudes and will work with Entergy and the Sewage and Water Board on these issues. We appreciate the Commission's consideration in this matter. Second comment from Scott Landry, LCMC Health, 210 State Street. The original design for renovations of Children's Hospital contemplated burying large fuel tanks along Calhoun Street, which is owned by the hospital. During final design, it was determined that in order to comply with the city stormwater management plan, a large water retention tanks were required to be buried all along Calhoun to hold 1 inch of rain within our campus to vastly improve the area drainage capabilities. To ensure proper management of stormwater, to reduce the risk of flooding, and to comply with the city's stormwater management provisions, the fuel tanks needed to be relocated. Children's Hospital applied for a permit for the placement of the fuel tanks on Leak Avenue. The permit was not denied. After discussions between Children's Hospital and the city, however, it was determined that the best solution would be for the city to dispose of Leak Avenue to allow Children's Hospital to purchase the property for installation of the diesel tanks. The proposed tanks are above ground, and the city was aware of the temporary placement of the tanks during the pendency of the city's consideration of the disposition of Leak Avenue. These above ground tanks can be removed if necessary, but to ensure the critical health care is not interrupted, the tanks need to be located near this area to provide fuel to Children's Hospital's generators, which will run the hospital for 10 days should there be a loss of power in the city. Children's Hospital has leased Leak Avenue from the city for decades. The city previously approved an addition to Children's Hospital's surgery department that encroached on Leak Avenue during the term of the lease. That structural addition is being removed as part of this renovation project. Similar to that construction project that encroached on Leak Avenue, the tanks should also be allowed to be placed on Leak Avenue. Respectfully, Scott Landry, Senior Vice President, Facilities and Support Services, LCMC Health, 200 Henry Clay Avenue. Next, Zachary Christensen, 425 Webster Street. Children's has been a good neighbor and the sale does not affect the neighborhood. No reason not to allow the sale. Lisa Lupin, 6025 Annunciation Street. Good afternoon. I would like to comment on the Leak Avenue stretch behind Children's Hospital. As a member of ARNA and a neighbor of the hospital, I would ask that the city grant the request to purchase this stretch of land behind the hospital. Children's has been a great neighbor to upgrade and maintain areas around the hospital, and I think it is fitting to grant them the purchase of this portion of land they use for vital support of medical equipment. It's a small stretch of land that has been maintained by the hospital for as long as I can remember and otherwise would be an overgrown shrub area. Next, Deborah Robinson, 617 Webster Street. As a neighbor of Children's Hospital, I support their acquisition of property on Leak Avenue. Next, Benjamin Whitworth, representing Children's Hospital, 200 Henry Clay Avenue. To whom it may concern, Children's Hospital enthusiastically agrees with the CPC staff recommendation to sell city-owned Leak Avenue right-of-way between Henry Clay and Audubon Park. For decades, Children's Hospital has leased this portion of Leak Avenue for a variety of uses, including parking, storage, and other hospital needs. Children's will be using a portion of the land to house 2 above-ground diesel fuel tanks for emergency generators and will use the remainder of the space for parking and a loading zone for the new loading dock. Diesel tanks are critical to hospital operations as the emergency generators supply the hospital's critical equipment with power during a hurricane or any other event in which normal electricity service is lost. All appropriate safety measures and inspections from an DEQ and other regulatory agencies are complied with. The sale of this land will not impact surrounding properties or adjacent area, and we appreciate the affirmative vote at today's meeting. Next, Mike Middleton, 303 Calhoun Street. I reside at 303 Calhoun Street, New Orleans, directly across the street from Children's Hospital. I'm writing to you to express my support for the hospital's request for approval to purchase a portion of Leak Avenue, which they have already been leasing for many years. The property has been used for parking, storage, and other hospital needs. I think it makes good business sense for the hospital to own property rather than lease it, as it is less expensive over a long period of time. It also ensures that they will continue to enjoy the use of the property and that the owner doesn't lease it out to someone else, thereby negatively impacting the hospital's daily operations. I have lived across the street from the hospital for 13 years. I can tell you that they have been a good neighbor and have worked diligently and honestly with the neighborhood when issues have arisen in the past. Please feel free to contact me at any time should you need additional information. I ask that you look favorably on the hospital's request to purchase the property. Next, Bonnie DeSalle, 325 Exposition Boulevard, New Orleans. This letter serves to support the hospital's purchase of historically leased city-owned land behind the hospital. As a neighbor of the hospital, I see no reason to oppose this transaction, as the hospital has used the land for decades in an appropriate manner for its operation. The sale of this portion of land will have no adverse repercussions to the neighborhood. If I can provide additional input, please feel free to contact me. Next, Crystal Furbos Duplessis, representing Children's Hospital, 200 Henry Clay Avenue. Children's Hospital New Orleans is a 257-bed academic pediatric medical center with more than 400 physicians trained in more than 40 pediatric specialties. Children's Hospital offers a comprehensive range of physicians trained in more than 40 of the healthcare services from birth to 21 years throughout Louisiana and the Gulf South. Currently, Children's Hospital is undergoing an extensive campus transformation, which is necessary investment in the future of Louisiana's children. The transformation of our uptown campus is not only improving the hospital's infrastructure and technology, the enhancements we're introducing will make it easier for patients and families across the region to access our vital services. The proposal before the commission today, which is the disposition by the City of New Orleans, Leak Avenue right-of-way between Henry Clay and Audubon Park to Children's Hospital, will enable us to continue our mission in providing 24-hour critical healthcare services to children. Children's Hospital is currently, as has for decades, leased this portion on Leak Avenue without any issues for various operational needs, such as parking and storage. Disposition of this property is appropriate for a number of reasons, including: one, its use by the hospital is consistent with the city's master plan and the future land use map. And two, the current and proposed use of Leak Avenue by Children's Hospital comports with the purpose and regulations governing the zoning districts of the property. For these reasons and those set forth in the City Planning Commission staff report, we urge you to vote in favor of this proposal. Next, from Dana Kimball, 414 Henry Clay Avenue. I support Children's Hospital purchase of city-owned land behind the hospital. I have complete confidence that the hospital has the best of intentions to protect and preserve our surrounding neighborhood. Next, Priyanka Desai, 6021 Chapatula Street, letter C. As a neighbor, I unequivocally support this purchase by Children's Hospital. The hospital has already been using this property for decades and has been responsible in the use of this property. Additionally, the hospital has always been conscious about the impact on the neighborhood, especially under new leadership. Again, I support this purchase without reservation. Thank you in advance for your consideration. Next, from Lindsay Boards, 6226 Annunciation Street. In referencing property disposition 00220, request by City of New Orleans to sell the Leak Avenue right-of-way to Children's Hospital. I strongly object. Children's Hospital has not been upfront on this and many other issues. There was no notice given to the neighborhood about this meeting. I only found about it from a third party. The issue of the hospital using the city's property in a manner that is not acceptable to the city is well documented. The risks and concerns raised by the city are truly grave and real, as aptly stated by a city government employee in September 2019 when discussing the issue. The installation of fuel tanks and the associated risks of spills, environmental contamination, fines, cleanup, evacuations, explosions, fires, etc. is very real and not a scenario that can be entered into by the city lightly or even typically. This plan is an atypical request to change your use of leased city property. Such a change is subject to written consent of the city and amendment of the Leak Avenue lease. We believe the hospital is trying to do an end around of the city's concerns by buying this property. Further, city planning staff were concerned that encroachments already on the subject right away, including the storage tanks, and potentially the building itself might prevent the possibility of a full width servitude. Again, after consulting again with the Sewage and Water Board, there is some uncertainty about the location of the water line, which may have been moved by the hospital during a construction project. I submit that there is more to this subject that can be determined in a short teleconference, and this docket item should be denied for those reasons, or at a minimum, tabled until a further investigation can be conducted. Next, from Christopher Roth, 6323 Annunciation. I support the initiative of Children's Hospital purchasing the limited section of Leak Avenue behind the hospital. This section of street serves no public function and represents an opportunity for the city to sell this asset. That money can be redirected to other important municipal initiatives. Children's Hospital is an important economic generator for the city, and the growth of Children's is important to our economy. Acquiring this land allows Children to continue its master plan. Next, from Justin Schmidt, 1506 7th Street. It is unfortunate that neighbors and their attorneys have turned to this ministerial process to use as leverage in their ongoing dispute with Children's Hospital regarding the use of its emergency helicopter service. Please do not allow these unrelated complaints and gratuitous comments affect the way you vote on this matter. Neighbors certainly have the right to comment on the matters within their neighborhood, but such dialogue must be conducted in the proper forum and not before a commission that is primarily tasked with review on the technical aspects of a land use matter. Here, there is simply no nexus between the proposed property disposition and the concerns expressed by the neighbors with respect to Children's Hospital's helicopter or its flight patterns. In fact, I believe some of these same neighbors have already initiated said process. Thank you. Next, Jonathan Brook, 200 Henry Clay Avenue. Children's Hospital requests that this matter go forward. It is our understanding that property management would like to review issues related to the placement of diesel tanks on the property. Note that this information was already contained in the staff report at page 3 in the general property description. This issue has already been considered by staff. Section G3B1 of Planning Commission rules state the Division of Real Estate and Records shall initiate all requests and shall bring all proposals before the Planning Advisory Committee for consideration. Under this language, all requests have to be initiated by property management and brought before the Planning Advisory Committee. This matter has been properly submitted to and considered by the Planning Advisory Committee, which voted to recommend disposition of the property. Because this procedure has been followed, Children's Hospital urges you to vote in accordance with the staff's recommendation and not defer this matter. We also urge the Commission to consider the urgent need for backup generators during hurricane season. This is a public safety consideration. In opposition to the application, Victoria Emmerling, 6334 Annunciation Street. I formally object to the disposition of property identified in number 6, property disposition Leak Avenue of September 22, 2020 agenda being taken up and considered during this Zoom conference as beyond the scope of Act 302 and legally impermissible. The agenda reflects that the meeting is limited to matters that are critical to the continuation of business of the public body and that are not able to be postponed to a meeting held in accordance with the other provisions of this Act 302 due to a legal requirement or other deadlines that cannot be postponed or delayed by the public body as required in Act 302. However, that is not true for item 6. Item 6 of the agenda concerning a proposal to sell city property does not fall within this discrete ambit and is therefore unlawful for that matter to be taken up during this remote Zoom conference. Accordingly, the CPC should decline to consider the matter and postpone consideration thereof unless and until this matter can be taken up at a regular meeting in which the public can appear and be heard in person. In an abundance of caution, I submit the following substantive comments on the merits of the proposal, but the fact that I am being forced to comment in an abundance of caution to the extent that the Commission takes up this matter is not and should not be construed as a waiver of my objection to the legality of its consideration in the first place. With that reservation clear, even if the item is considered by the Commission members, the proposal set forth for the disposition of portion of Leak Avenue should be rejected due to health, safety, and environmental concerns posed by the future use for which this sale is proposed. On October 3rd, 2017, the adjacent landowner filed an application to construct a new 4-story cast-in-place central tower and renovation of existing space. Part of the proposed renovation included the installation of 2 diesel fuel tanks on the property at issue in agenda item 6, which the property owner leased from the city of New Orleans. The adjacent landowner was expressly told that the diesel fuel tanks could not be installed on the reference property and that the permit would not be approved unless and until the reference tanks were removed from all submissions.
All that time.
That's time. Next is Joseph Casciola, 307 Webster Street. Concerning the matter of LCMC Children's Hospital and their desired acquisition of city-owned property, Leak Avenue, for the installation of fuel tanks, which seemingly has taken place on the property and is not permitted by the City of New Orleans, I want to express my objection to this based on my concern of the potential for explosion, leakage, a huge environmental issue. This, coupled with the fact that children's hospitals seem to build and develop without proper permitting from the City of New Orleans. These fuel tanks seem to be already installed, and it is my understanding that they were denied by safety and permits. Children's Hospital LCMC installed them regardless. Children's Hospital seems to have never considered the impact this could have on the immediate residential neighborhood that is quiet nearby. For that matter, the river, the railroad tracks, Audubon Zoo, and its population of animals. Also, if the property is being sold by the City of New Orleans, shouldn't this be available for public knowledge? This doesn't seem to be taking place. What is the City Planning Commission, Safety and Permits, and City Council doing to protect its citizens in this matter? I respectfully urge the City Planning Commission to deny the proposed purchase and investigate and revoke any permissions to install fuel tanks at this location for environmental and safety concerns. Next is Melissa Ray, 6301 Chapatula Street. To all involved parties, I am deeply troubled to learn at this late date that tomorrow there is a CPC meeting to consider selling a piece of public property just across the street from my home at 6301 Chapatula Street, corner of Calhoun and Chapatulas. I'm gravely concerned to learn that it contains unpermitted large fuel tanks and that I was completely unaware. As I understand it, LCMC Children's Hospital has a long-term lease for a portion of Leak Avenue between the railroad and the hospital from Henry Clay to Audubon Park. As I understand it, LCMC-CH has also applied to permit to place large fuel tanks on the property as part of their renovations and was denied by safety and permits for safety concerns, as well as the fact that in order to build this on city property, several criteria would have to be met. In the CPC preliminary staff report, it stated the hospital has already constructed some storage tanks within the right-of-way, which is one of the reasons the city is interested in selling the property. Am I correct that the LCMC-CH was denied a permit and then they built the fuel storage tanks without a permit? And so now the CPC is recommending the city just sell the property? This is unreal, almost too reprehensible to believe. I strongly object to this issue being voted on at this meeting on September 22nd for the following reasons. Matters that are critical to the continuation of the business of the commission and that are not able to be postponed to a meeting due to a legal requirement or deadline in the comprehensive zoning ordinance that cannot be changed. This issue isn't critical to the continuation of the business of the commission. It is not under a legal requirement or deadline in the CZO. Therefore, it would be illegal to include it in Tuesday's meeting. Immediate neighbors of the property were not notified in a timely manner in order to gather data in order to properly represent objections or support in the matter. I strongly object to this sale being approved for the following reasons. If the safety and permits rejected the request for a permit to install the tanks, a sale of the property so they can have the illegally built tanks is a blatant workaround in disregard for the city and its safety and permits process.
All this time.
Okay. Next comment is from Jordan Keller, representing Audubon Riverside Neighborhood Association, 413 Calhoun Street. I strongly oppose the sale of this land to LCMC. Next is Alex Gross, 6319 Chapatula Street. The planned use of this land and the reason it is being sold has only recently come to light publicly. One, the planned sale is to allow the adjoining landowner to house up to 50,000 gallon underground diesel fuel tank, among other things. Two, a use that the city affirmatively rejected as unsafe and unallowed to the extent it remained on public property. The purpose of Children's Hospital is not only continue to use the land for parking, as stated in the staff report, but also to circumvent city ordinance and install underground or otherwise denied fuel storage tanks. You mentioned these tanks as storage tanks, but failed to mention they were installed without permitting. In fact, after being denied, you and the neighbors deserve the opportunity to learn more about the situation, consider implications, and formulate an opinion on an issue that could be so detrimental to our neighborhood and fragile river ecosystems. We are gravely concerned that the sale of this property is meant to sidestep these very real concerns for the city for its property and the health, safety, and environmental duties it owes to the city's citizens of New Orleans. Next is Bruce Goodwin, 6301 Annunciation Street. LCMC illegally constructed a 50,000-gallon underground diesel fuel tank on this publicly owned property. They now seek to make this property private and thereby retroactively legalize the existing fuel tank. This is an outrageous example of criminal corporate behavior. Do not tolerate this blatant disregard for the law and callous indifference to the safety of citizens. Next, Robert Denny, 6334 Annunciation Street, New Orleans. Objection to consideration of sale of property with future public use. The proposed property disposition should also be rejected as the sale of the referenced property is still needed for public purpose, precluding any consideration of the sale of the property. The property at issue is a part of Leak Avenue. The Leak Avenue property is dedicated from Jefferson Parish line to near downtown. The history of this property and its dedication to be used as a proposed street for the city as part of a future development dates back to ordinance number 15080 dated March 1st, 1899, wherein Leak Avenue was expressly addressed. Sheet 3 of proposed street map references ordinance 15080 and shows the proposed street to be located on referenced property. In addition, a plan prepared by Coleman references Leak Avenue per ordinance 15080 and shows it running through the park from Foucheux Youthville line to Fouché Greenville line. Similarly, a May 15th, 1975 survey of the old U.S. Public Health Hospital just downriver from Children's notes Leak Avenue and the referenced ordinance thereon. Thus, the property was maintained by the city and has always been a part of the street plan and future development for the city. The sale of this property and the allowance of the installation of the permanent facilities thereon, such as the reference tanks, or a building as planned by the adjacent property owner bisects this dedicated thoroughfare and renders the future corridor useless, the whole purpose of why the property was held onto the city these many years. The well-laid plans of the city and the health and safety of its citizens and environment should not be sacrificed because this entity went ahead and illegally constructed storage tanks on property it had been explicitly told to leave alone. It is short-sighted and wrong to allow such conduct to be rewarded at the expense of the city and its citizens. As such, I ask the CPC to deny this proposal and/or as a part of the sale, forever precluding the property from being used in the above referenced manner, fuel storage tanks, or serving as a location for any permanent structures. Next is James McCutcheon, 6226 Annunciation Street. Property disposition 220, request by the City of New Orleans to sell the Leak Avenue right-of-way to Children's Hospital. I strongly object. Children's Hospital has not been upfront on this and many other issues. There was no notice given to the neighborhood about this meeting. They only found about it from a third party. The issue of the hospital using the city's property in a manner that is not acceptable to the city is well documented. The risks and concern raised by the city are truly grave and real, as aptly stated by a city government employee on September of 2019 when discussing the issue. The installation of fuel tanks and the associated risk of spills, environmental contamination, fines, cleanup, evacuations, explosions, fires, etc. is very real and is not a scenario that can be entered into by the city lightly or even typically. This plan is an atypical request to change your use of leased city property. Such a change is subject to written consent of the city and an amendment to the Leak Avenue lease. We believe the hospital is trying to do an end around of the city's concerns by buying the property. Further, city planning staff were concerned that encroachments already on the subject right-of-way, including the storage tanks and potentially the building itself, might prevent the possibility of a full width servitude. After consulting again with Sewage and Water Board, there is also some uncertainty about the location of the water line, which may have been moved by the hospital during a construction project. I submit that there has been more on this subject that can be determined in a short teleconference, and this docket should be denied for those reasons, or at a minimum, tabled until a further investigation can be conducted. Next, comment from Joe Giarusso, 1300 Perdido Street. Right now, I'm at a loss. According to property management, there has been a litany of lease and permitting issues. Assuming those issues remain, they should be corrected before any sale is finalized. Along with other issues raised by the neighbors, I am urging a deferral until these matters are given appropriate attention. There is no reason to rush considering the circumstances. Next, Michelle Andre, 326 Henry Clay Avenue. I believe this to be unsafe for our city. Next, Elizabeth Carville, 431 Henry Clay Avenue. I learned about this meeting and an agenda item yesterday. I understand that LCMC has already built a storage fuel tank on this property owned by the city after the city expressly denied their request to do so. I live on Henry Clay, just a few blocks from this location, and the construction of fuel tanks without following proper procedures is of great concern to me and my family, as well as other families in the neighborhood. It seems that the proper use of this facility, this city-owned property, must be examined before a sale that would, in effect, provide LCMC the ability to work around the fact that they failed to follow proper procedures in connection with the construction of the fuel tank after the city denied their request due to health, safety, and environmental concerns. The citizens of New Orleans and the surrounding neighborhood deserve a voice in these proceedings, and I ask that you allow additional time to provide notice to those affected and to allow for further evaluation and public comment prior to making a decision with respect to the sale of this property to house storage fuel tanks. And one final comment, writing to request to provide information, Diane Meyer, 720 Calhoun Street, request please defer. That's the last comment.
Thank you so much, Paul, for reading all those public comments. We just heard a great deal from quite a few residents of public comment. And I just want to kind of state as chair of the City Planning Commission, our only, this document was brought to us for property disposition as in phase of one of the steps for the city to dispose of property after any city entities did not actually have a need for the property. So this is one of those steps. But we've also received a request from the applicant, which is essentially the city, for deferment. And they requested for a deferral to October 27th, 2020, probably based on the public comment that we've heard today. Based on the public comment that we've heard, if we so take up a deferral, I would also request that the city work with the Councilman Caruso office, which the councilman also had a comment to kind of clear the communication up about exactly what's taking place, because I think sometimes we just kind of, if we don't have clear communication, things just kind of take their own path. So at this time, are there any other comments or a motion from any other commissioner as it relates to property disposition 0020?
Motion for deferral to the second meeting in October.
It's been moved by Commissioner Weberg for deferral. Is there a second to that motion?
Commissioner Flick, second.
Commissioner Flick seconds the motion of Commissioner Weberg for deferral to October 27, 2020. Is there any further discussion on the motion?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I have a question or two for either staff or for council, just to help me understand the background of this entire matter. We've heard a lot, and I realize that if we defer, these will become considerations for later, but I think it would help to at least understand the basics of the background now. Is there an underground diesel tank in the middle of this leased property now? I mean, that's a physical fact. Is that a yes or a no? Does either staff or council know?
Yes, there are storage tanks. They're not underground, they're actually above ground.
Okay.
There is a smaller set of storage tanks just below Avenger Field. And then there's two larger storage tanks that are directly behind the hospital building.
And are they permitted and legal, or are they not?
So,
are you going to read her comment, Paul?
Yeah, I do have a background comment from Department of Property Management. If I read that, it might make some things more clear. That'd be all right?
Please.
Go ahead and please read them into the records.
All right. Statement, the city may sell through public auction immovable property, real estate that is no longer needed for public purpose. Department of Property Management, through the Division of Real Estate and Records, locates property that the city is not using, or a constituent may bring a request regarding a particular property to the division and request that it be sold at public auction. Children's Hospital entered into a lease agreement with the city, portions of Leak Avenue adjacent to Children's Hospital in 2000 for a term of 60 years. They expressly reserved the right to terminate the lease for the extension of Leak Avenue if the project became funded. In July 2019, the lessee, Children's Hospital, requested to amend the lease to accommodate its plans for multiple state-of-the-art above-ground fuel storage tanks, a loading dock, and a portion of its new building to be located on the premises leased from the city. The Department of Property Management rejected the request based on policy considerations of such new uses, including but not limited to potential fuel spills and the unfavorable precedent of allowing private fuel tanks and permanent structures on city property. Children's Hospital later requested that the Division of Real Estate and Records present to the City Planning Commission a proposal that the dead end portion of Leak Avenue between Henry Clay and Exposition Boulevard be sold at public auction. The request was presented to the Planning Advisory Committee. The Division of Real Estate and Records did not object to the disposition request at the committee meeting because the property is no longer needed for public purpose. The property is saleable, subject to certain provisos for utilities. The sale would generate needed funds for the city, and the successful bidder would be subject to all applicable laws. The photographed fuel tanks, which are in your staff report, were built without the knowledge of property management and on belief without any permit, which was on hold at the request of property management and safety permits.
Commissioner Steve?
So that almost, that it doesn't quite answer the question kind of clearly, but it gets close. So is there a determination of, are those tanks legal or not?
So the statement does state that it is their belief that they were not permitted.
Okay.
And the city never gave its consent to have them installed on city property.
Okay. And do we know whether if it were private property, they would be legal or not? Are there other restrictions that would prevent them from being legal on private property, or are there no such restrictions and they would be legal?
I'd probably prefer to answer that at the next meeting if I had a chance to talk with safety and permits, though. It would certainly not be unusual for a large institution to have diesel fuel tanks for backup generators. We'd certainly see that at other hospitals and universities. And those are generally treated sort of the way you would treat HVAC permits, but I can get some.
Can I ask on the assumption? Oh, sorry, Commissioner Stewart.
So Commissioner Steve, before you ask that next question, I'll ask at this time. Bob, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I was going to say, my understanding is that there is a permitting process underway, and we can get confirmation of that and give you an update on that process when this comes back before you.
Great. So that's what I was going to ask. So on the assumption that the motion to defer is going to pass, could I request that either staff or legal or both look into these issues and be prepared to talk to us about whether the tanks would be legal if the strip were privately acquired, and what the restrictions would be and what the processes would be. And then my only other question is, this request came to us on a motion from the Property Management Department or from City Council?
This Property Management.
Okay, so this hasn't been seen by City Council at all?
No, this is this process, whatever decision is made by the City Planning Commission. Well, actually, a positive recommendation would be forwarded to the City Council for the City Council's commission consideration. A negative, I believe, would not be forwarded to the city council because this is, and I don't know if you remember the Newcomb Boulevard case that we had. The disposition of property requires the consent of the mayor and the city planning commission. So if the result of this is a denial, then it would not be forwarded to council.
Okay, great. And that was my next question. Okay, that's all I wanted to clear up. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Steeg. Are there any other comments or questions from any other commissioner for staff? Or comments?
I had a couple of questions, and most of them were just addressed by the questions Commissioner Steeg asked and answered pretty much. My only question, and it could have already been on here or included in Paul's explanation, but this came to us through property management. And at the time of the request, they did not have this information that they are now saying they need before which is the reason they want us to defer. They did not know that there were tanks, or that they didn't know about the whether or not that it was a prohibited use.
So they were aware of the 2 smaller tanks, but not the larger 2.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments for staff? Or in reference to property disposition?
So if I could just add a final comment, the response you just got from Paul was, was the response that came from property management, and I recognize that as the applicant, what we can probably do is make a request that a representative from property management, and if there is a permitting process underway, a representative from safety and permits, either give a statement or be present for the meeting.
Thanks. That'd be great.
Okay, so at this time, we have a motion by Commissioner Weber for deferral to October 27th. And we have a second. If there's no further discussion at this time, I'll call the question. Commissioner Brown.
Yes.
Commissioner Flick.
Yes.
Commissioner Marshall.
Yes.
Commissioner Mobley.
Yes.
Commissioner Steed.
Yes.
Commissioner Stewart. Yes. Commissioner Weberg.
Yes.
Commissioner Witry.
Yes.
Unanimous support for the deferral. Support for deferral to October 27, 2020. At this time now, our last agenda item is the 2021-2025 Capital Improvement Plan, which we received a request for deferral to October 13th. We didn't receive any public comment in reference to that docket matter. At this time, are there any comments or questions or a motion from any commissioner?
Motion to defer to October 13th.
Is it moved by Commissioner Weber for a motion for deferral to October 13th? Is there a second to that motion?
Witry will second.
Commissioner Witry has seconded the motion. Are there any further discussion or comments? Now I'll call the question. Commissioner Brown?
Yes.
Commissioner Flick?
Yes.
Commissioner Marshall?
Yes.
Commissioner Mobley?
Yes.
Commissioner Steed?
Yes.
Commissioner Stewart? Yes. Commissioner Weberg?
Yes.
Commissioner Witry?
Yes.
Unanimous support for deferral on a motion for deferral to October 13th. At this time now, that concludes all our docket matters. We don't have any committee reports. So I'll entertain a motion for adjournment. And if we can take a unanimous vote. So is there a motion for adjournment?
So moved by Commissioner Marshall.
Is it moved by Commissioner Marshall? Is there a second to that motion?
Commissioner Flick.
Commissioner Flick seconds. And at this time now, if there isn't any opposition for adjournment, we will be dismissed.
Can we have discussion?
Sure, go ahead.
Was anybody keeping track of who had the most seconds today? I was trying to keep track on a sticky note. I could never get into the race to see who